Chapter 25, The Eldest Princess Filter. How did they know that Su Shang'ai grew up watching Shen Zai, but they had never seen Her Royal Highness the Princess grow up with such a happy smile and a relieved expression. It was the night when the Chongyun festival feast came back from outside the palace. As usual, she went from Shanghai Bureau to Mingfeng Palace at dusk to visit the eldest princess. When they entered, the palace people said that the princess was inside. So she lifted the beaded curtain and saw the princess sitting in front of the mirror, gently reaching out and touching her cheek. Su Shang'ai only felt that she was dreaming. Because all the palace people who serve in Mingfeng Palace know that Her Royal Highness the eldest princess hates to see the mirror the most, except for some big celebrations, which need to be solemn and dignified, she will take a look in the mirror for the palace people after dressing and decorating herself. Usually she doesn't even want to look at the mirror, and the dress is all up to the palace people to see with their eyes, but she doesn't care much. What's going on now? Before she could recover from the shock, she was wondering if something had happened to Her Royal Highness the Princess, and Her Royal Highness the eldest princess saw her in the makeup mirror, stood up and turned around and hugged her, with a smile on her face. "Auntie, look at me." Only then did she see clearly. The eldest princess changed her makeup, and gently traced the fine scar left at the corner of her eye when she was a child with cherry pink, just like a petal of falling cherry blossoms on the beauty's face, erasing the damage left by the original scar, but adding a new bright color. What is more important is the demeanor of the princess. In the past, I was happy, and there was a depression in my eyebrows, but today it is all gone. A glittering divine light burst out from her eyes, and it was calm and burning. At that moment, she couldn't hold back the sudden feeling of emotion in her heart, and sincerely admired, "It's so beautiful." But the eldest princess didn't say why she was like this suddenly. Of course, Su Shang'ai kept an eye on it, and when she left the Mingfeng Palace, she asked the palace people who went out of the palace with the eldest princess that day, and then she knew that she met a very different young lady at the banquet in Qing Yuanbo's mansion. It was the second lady in Zhang Shilang's mansion, named Zhang Xuning. At that time, she was only glad that the princess had finally met a very good friend. Didn't want to do anything either. But not long after, she saw the name of this Zhang Er girl in the companion list of Her Royal Highness the Princess. Although Su Shang'ai didn't dare to say that she treated Shen Zai as her own, she really loved her, and wished that Her Royal Highness the Princess would stay with such a person who could make her happy. Although everyone around her dropped their jaws, she only looked at Zhang Xuning. Seeing that this second girl Zhang looked at herself in a daze, she didn't seem to react, and her brows almost frowned subconsciously, but then she thought that this good friend who would become a princess couldn't be scolded at will, so she reminded again, "Second girl Zhang." Zhang Xuning woke up like a dream at this time, and said busily, Then there is Lord Lao Shang'ai." Su Shang'ai nodded, glanced around at everyone again, and said, "Let's start." At the beginning, it was said that the 12 people were divided into 3 groups, but now it is clear that there are 4 groups of people: Xiao Shu, Chen Shiyi, Yao Shi, 3 people together, Fan Yulan, Yu Yu, Fang Miao, Zhou Baoying, 4 people together, Yao Rongrong, and 3 other Zhang Xuning people who have no impression of Zhang Xuning together, and Zhang Xuning, who came out alone, is a group. The other 3 female officers taught the 3 groups. Su Shang'ai pointed out Zhang Xuning alone. The others almost stared out their eyes. Most of them had a subtle attitude towards Zhang Xuning from the beginning. Who told her that she didn't submit her name, but in the end she chose to read with her. It shows that there are some things that outsiders don't know, and there is also a very special place in this group of companions. Now not only is the selection time special, but even the etiquette in the palace middle school has to give her special treatment. Su Shang'ai, such a stern person, pretends to be a color for her. Some people are really unbalanced. This is headed by Yu. She had already had a little holiday with Zhang Xuning, and just now she saw Su Shanghai walking towards Zhang Xuning with a cold face, and she only thought that Zhang Xuning was going to be unlucky. But before she could be happy for a moment, Su Shanghai's attitude towards Zhang Xuning was like a slap in the face, and before she could even put away her smile, she felt a lot of pain. At this moment, I almost crushed a good tooth without hatred. It's just that soon, while learning etiquette from the female official, while secretly paying attention to the progress of Su Shanghai and Zhang Xuning, everyone found out, this Zhang Xuning doesn't seem to be very good. The female officials of the Shanghai Bureau came to teach etiquette, and the first thing to teach was to stand. The station should have a standing sample. Su Shanghai said very clearly, the legs should be together, the waist should be straight, and the back should not be bent a little, but the neck should be slightly lowered, and the head should be buried for 3 points. Fold your hands and buckle them around your waist, don't really stick to them. Keep your elbows up, look the same height from side to side, and don't sit lazily. However, Zhang Xuning. When the legs are together, the waist is not straight, the waist is straight, the back is bent, the back is straight, the neck is stiff, the neck is hanging down, and the head is still on its own, and finally the battle is right, and the way the hands are folded is not right, the left and right arms are shaking like the tumbler, and there is no way to set the same height anyway. I've never seen anyone with such an incongruous body. Zhang Xuning didn't change her face, she was calm, and she didn't know how bad she was. Su Shanghai is known for being strict in the palace, but in fact he is a person who can't rub sand under his eyes, and he dares to reprimand anyone in the palace with a cold face when he sees anyone in the palace who has no rules, so his temper is not small. She originally thought that if she could explain the princess, she should be a delicate person with a good mind. And it doesn't look stupid. Who would have thought that Yu Jiao would be like an elm pimple, and there was no shame at all. You poke her, she changes it, if you don't poke it, you can stay there for a long time, and you don't know what you did wrong in reviewing yourself. Where is the clever energy on the face? Su Shanghai's fingers clasped around her waist were a little tight, and her bones were faintly white, and she couldn't hold it back for a moment and burst out. But soon she thought of the eldest princess of Liang again. No. Never mind. It doesn't matter if you're stupid, at most it's just a longer time to teach. Be patient, be patient. After constantly admonishing herself with these words in her heart, Su Shanghai finally exhaled softly, suppressed the anger, maintained the smile on her face, which was already slightly stiff, and said to Zhang Xuning against her will, "It's okay, take your time, second girl Zhang is a little better than just now." Zhang Xuning. Su Shanghai, when did your requirements become so low? Others. This is definitely not the Su Shanghai we know. Fake. There is no doubt that Zhang Xuning has no intention of learning any etiquette here seriously at all. She had studied it in her previous life. Not to mention how he lived in the palace for a period of time later, even if he became a queen, he was a little lazy in terms of manners, but many things have become habits, and no matter how bad they are, they can't be worse than other ladies who have just entered the palace as companions. But these young ladies of the family worked hard to stay. She is a person who has made up her mind to leave. What is the truth? What is the strength? Not only should you not be serious, don't work hard, but also deliberately perform a look that you can't learn no matter what, so that Su Shanghai feels that her rotten wood is not carved. However, the plan did not go well. Zhang Xuning's previous foreboding turned out to come true. Although Su Shanghai came to teach herself in this life, one was kind to her, and the other was extremely patient with her, and there was no devilish posture like in the previous life that could say that you can't do it. On the contrary, no matter how she acted, Su Shang'ai clasped her palm tightly and looked at her with an encouraging look of no matter how hard you work, I believe you can. It's tricky. Was looked at with this kind of eyes by the psychological shadow of the previous life, and goosebumps came out directly. Jiang Xuaning's whole person is not good. No, be calm. She knows what kind of temper Su Shang'ai has. Now it may be for some other reason to be extra tolerant of her, but everyone's tolerance is limited. Once a certain limit is crossed, even saints will have a seizure. It doesn't matter if the method of hiding clumsiness and pretending to be stunned doesn't work for a while, you must not give up. Persistence is victory. If she can't anger Su Shang'ai now, it must be because she hasn't done it enough, and she hasn't done it long enough. Jiang Xuaning could see that Su Shang'ai was patient. She deliberately and inadvertently lowered the arm that had just been raised, and after clearly seeing Su Shang'ai's eyes twitch uncontrollably, she put on a shy smile, and said, "Thank you, Lord Shang'ai, I have been stupid since I was a child, I can't learn anything, you have to bother with it. I don't believe you can bear it." Su Shang'ai really almost couldn't hold back, and wanted to scold her for being not only stupid, but more importantly, lazy. However, the words came to his mouth and he swallowed them. Think of princesses. Think of princesses. She reflected that she might have pressed too hard. This Jiang second girl was a little nervous, and she also needed to calm down now, so she said, "It's okay, second girl has been practicing for so long, she should be tired, rest for a while and then continue." Others who are being strictly instructed by other female officers. Whoosh! The sound of a sharp blade could be heard in the air. Jiang Xuaning clearly felt that there were more than a dozen eye knives next to him, and they flew to his body in an instant, and he couldn't wait to poke himself into a sieve. You know, other people are different from her. Su Shang'ai is the female official in charge of the Shanghai Bureau, and the other 3 female officials who came with her are all her subordinates. Now in the same room with Su Shang'ai, teaching court etiquette under the nose of Su Shang'ai, who has always been strict, who dares not to cheer up. Even if he originally received some money to take care of, he didn't dare to release the water easily at this time. If one is accidentally seen by Su Shang'ai, it will become a big deal. So instead of slacking off, these female officials are stricter than usual, not smiling, and they are the second, third, and fourth Su Shang'ai. However, Su Shang'ai himself. But it is releasing water like never before. So the situation that the others faced and the situation they had originally envisioned were completely lost. I thought that Jiang Xuaning fell into the hands of Su Shang'ai, and her limbs were so stupid that she would definitely be tortured to the point of being unhuman, and they were watching jokes on the side, but the current situation is that Jiang Xuaning is easy on Su Shang'ai's side, and there is nothing to do, and the ordinary female officials who they thought are not very strict have tossed them to death. They can't learn, and the female officials have to be scolded with a cold face. Jiang Xuaning couldn't learn, but Su Shang'ai told her to sit down and rest. For a moment, Jiang Xuaning was stunned. At the beginning, she chose a companion to read without presenting her name but came in, which already made her very special among everyone, faintly isolated. Now that she has such special treatment in learning etiquette, if she really sits down, she will undoubtedly immediately become a thorn in everyone's eyes, a thorn in the flesh, and a public enemy for everyone. And yet it's all happening. She realized that the more this was the case, the more she would have to rivet out of the court, or else stay here and wait for the others to be dismantled. There is no way back. When attacking is defensive. Jiang Xuaning immediately showed a look of emotion and surprise, and said, I've been tired for a long time. Lord Shang'ai is really good at being compassionate. Then he took the plunge and sat down on the chair next to him seemingly calmly. Yes, it's really a butt. Big grin, no elegance. Su Shang'ai suddenly felt that she almost didn't catch her breath, so she only forced herself to look away immediately, and silently recited in her heart, there is no Amitabha Buddha in the south, out of sight is pure. Out of sight is pure. Since the princess has good eyes on her, then there must be something extraordinary about this girl, and she has not yet found out that it must be her own clumsiness. Calm down and slowly discover her beauty. After all, it had been standing for more than half an hour, and Zhang Xuning felt comfortable after sitting down, but it was just. The back is a little cool. Turning her eyes, she saw that the eyes of the others really fell on her, and Yu Yu's face was even more pale, and she almost crooked her nose out of breath. Fang Miao was also looking at her. At this moment, she was standing behind Fan Yulan, looking at Zhang Xuning's comfortable posture in the chair that was very comfortable at first glance, and she almost cried with envy, wishing that she could beat herself up more than half an hour ago. Why bother? What to change? The first feeling is the most right. Zhang Xuning is the one who has potential, why don't you muster up the courage to persist and persist? Otherwise, you can sit there and cool now. Thankfully, she didn't sit there for long. After Su Shang'ai adjusted her mentality, she asked her to get up again and continue to learn the rules. However, what she never expected was. After resting for a while, Zhang Xuning not only did not make any progress, but it seemed to be worse than before. As if she was very patient with her, she didn't even have the kind of beautiful demeanor at the beginning, which made people angry. Su Shang'ai almost felt that she was going to get sick. I can't even keep the smile on my lips. It's just that she is still trying to maintain it, even if her voice trembles, she has to say to Zhang Xuning, it's okay, it's already better, second Miss Zhang will do it again. As everyone knows, Zhang Xuning's heart was trembling at this time. She really wanted to rush up and grab Su Shang'ai's shoulder, shake it at her, and shout at her, Su Shang'ai, you sober up and show your original temper. But no. Now it's up to you to see who can hold your breath and who can't hold back first. The etiquette teaching of others has been carried out for more than half of the time, and Su Shang'ai and Zhang Xuning finally managed to stand. At this time, whether it is the person who instructs or the person who is instructed, fine beads of sweat appear on their foreheads. Su Shang'ai is angry. Zhang Xuning is tired. Even if Su Shang'ai is kind to her, it is a big burden for her to repeat that stupid action over and over again, and it is very difficult for her to pay attention to not accidentally doing the right thing and exposing herself. During the second break, she looked at Su Shang'ai's expression, estimating that her patience should have reached the limit. As long as she worked harder, she could be scolded by her and leave the palace to go home. So when she stood up for the third time, Zhang Xuning's heart was full of hope. Now start learning to walk. She planned to continue to do it, but she didn't expect that Shen Zai, the eldest princess of Liang, would come in from outside at this time. With the sound of Her Royal Highness the eldest princess has arrived, everyone bowed down and saluted. Shen Zai is wearing a light blue palace dress today, and the scar under the corner of her left eye is still painted with the appearance of a falling cherry blossom petal, which is very good looking. When people walk in from the face with a smile, it is so bright that it looks like a good blue sky outside, and there is a kind of good looking that dazzles people's eyes. As soon as she got closer, her eyes fell on Zhang Xuning. Zhang Xuning stiffened. She only waved her hand, sat down on the side, and said to everyone, no need to be polite. This princess is here to see, you can just continue. Everyone immediately agreed. The female officers went back to teach others. Su Shanghai continued to teach Zhang Xuning. Zhang Xuning didn't feel anything wrong at this time, although the arrival of the eldest princess of Liang made her a little uneasy, but after all, the other party just glanced at her, and there was no superfluous action, which made her feel a little relieved. She gathered her mind and continued to pretend. Su Shanghai said, when walking in the palace, don't look at the road, don't look around. The best step distance for women is 1 foot, which is the distance of the ruler under your feet. Zhang Xuning took a step. Suddenly, there was a snap. I didn't pay attention, and stepped on the ruler. The ruler is broken. Su Shanghai began to feel that a tendon in her temple was tense, constantly beating, and it was faintly about to break. However, a voice came from the side. It turned out that Shen Zai looked at Zhang Xuning with a smile on her hand. Stars were about to pop up in her eyes, and she said to the palace maid beside her without looking back, "Look." She trampled on the things in the palace, and her expression didn't even change at all, so calm and calm. Others. Wait a minute, what's going on with this tone of no blame or even a little appreciation and intoxication? Zhang Xuning. It's okay if I didn't hear it, it's okay, I can continue to do it. Su Shanghai listened to Shen Zai's words, and saw with her own eyes that her princess liked the girl in front of her, and her original anger calmed down at once, calmed down again, asked someone to take another ruler, and said to Zhang Xuning, please also ask the second girl to take a new step. Zhang Xuning took another step. This time, I didn't step on the ruler again, but the step was at most half a foot, which seemed very casual, far from what Su Shanghai said at the beginning. 1 foot is the best. When Shen Zai saw it, she sighed softly, holding her face and admiring. In ancient times, poets described the beauty as delicate, saying weak willow supporting the wind and lotus step moving lightly. I still don't believe it. I think that the daughter's steps are a little smaller, and she may not be good looking. I saw Ning Ning, and I realized that there are really people in the world who take small steps and will look so good. Others don't understand what this is all about. Her Royal Highness the eldest princess, what kind of eyes are these? This obviously didn't put Su Shanghai's words in her ears. She was very slack. Why did she praise her again? After Zhang Xuning heard this, the solace of her feet trembled when she didn't stand firmly, and she almost slipped. Shen Zai put her palms together on her chest, smiled so that her eyes were full of soft and tolerant light, and she only said, look, even if you almost slip, you cannot change your face, and good-looking people really do everything that is pleasing to the eye. Zhang Xuning stood up in shock, her heart trembled when she heard the words, her eyelids jumped. This time she really didn't pay attention, her left foot was tripped by her right foot, she didn't stand firm in an instant, and knelt on the ground. Fortunately, I used my palm to hold it in time, and it didn't hurt too much. Seeing this, Shen Zai immediately got up from her seat, and walked directly to her to help her up, with a distressed look. Why are you so careless? Zhang Xuning got up with soft legs, as if she had gone to half a life, and said tremblingly, the courtiers have grown up in the countryside, and they really haven't learned the rules of the palace, and they are lazy and stupid, and the etiquette in this palace really can't be learned. I'm afraid that they will live up to the love of the eldest princess. It's just a shame to stay here, and she asked the eldest princess to send her courtiers out of the palace, and the courtiers are self-aware and don't dare to expect to read for the princess. What nonsense are you talking about? Shen Zai had already held her hand, and there was a natural intimacy in her expression. Last time at the Chongyang banquet, you painted a cherry blossom makeup for this princess, and this princess liked it very much, and everyone else in the palace followed suit. It's too late for this princess to like you. The etiquette in this palace, if you can't learn it, it doesn't matter, this princess is covering you. Besides, you don't know how hard this princess went to get you into the palace. Jiang Xunning's eyelids jumped again, and a familiar unpleasant feeling came to her heart. Sure enough, Shen Zai showed a slightly aggrieved look, but she came up and looked a little pitiful, but the words were completely the same as Yan Lin's invitation. At the beginning, although Yan Lin asked this princess to add your name, this princess really wanted you to enter the palace. The selection of companions should be in accordance with the rules formulated by the Ministry of Rites, and those whose names were not presented at the beginning could not be used as companions. Princess Ben found the old men in the Ministry of Rites, and it took a long time to get them to agree. How about it? I'm okay with you, are you happy? Jiang Xunning. Sure enough, you also have a share of the matter of me entering the palace. Jiang Xunning's face was already blank. She looked back at Shen Zai's bright face, slowly hooked up a smile, and replied very decently, Her Royal Highness the eldest princess is too good to the courtiers, and the courtiers are so happy. It's really too, meow, of, hi, happy. Chapter 26, No Solution. No normal person can withstand the fact that the eldest princess of Liang is completely blind to the facts, let alone Jiang Xunning, who has the psychological shadow of her previous life. But fortunately, this situation did not last long. Shen Zai had just been sitting here for a while, and someone from the palace came to look for her, saying that the Queen Mother had invited her to come over to talk to relieve her boredom, and Shen Zai had to reluctantly go. Before leaving, he also took Jiang Xunning's hand and said, Anyway, this princess likes you. If there is anything in the palace in the past few days, even if you tell the palace maids who are fasting, they will come to report me. I'll go and come to see you tomorrow. Jiang Xunning breathed a sigh of relief and watched Shen Zai leave. In the end, this day ended with her reluctantly learning court etiquette with Su Shanghai, who was dedicated and patient. No way. It's too tiring to pretend, and Jiang Xunning thought back to Shen Zai's attitude on this matter, and even said things like it doesn't matter if you can't learn, what's the point of her pretending again? If you can't make a plan, you have to change it. It's just that she can't let others see the clues, so she stayed up until it was getting late, as if she was gradually taught by Su Shanghai, and her movements began to become smooth, and she slowly met Su Shanghai's strict standards. At the end, Su Shanghai rarely showed a look of relief, only looked at her, and pointed at her to everyone. It can be seen that it doesn't matter how bad the talent is. As the saying goes, a stupid bird flies first and diligence can make up for clumsiness. As long as you are willing to work hard, many difficulties in the world can still be overcome. Second, Miss Jiang did a good job today, you should take her as a mirror. Jiang Xunning. Everyone else is slandering in their hearts that if they can be used as a mirror, everyone should not enter the palace, but they all said in unison, yes, yes. Su Shanghai pointed out. Su Shanghai then told them to disperse, and left with the 3 female officials of the Shanghai Bureau. In this late autumn weather, Jiang Xunning was sweating all over, and when she saw people leaving, she didn't bother to say hello to anyone, so she immediately went back to her house and asked the palace maid who was fasting to prepare a fragrant soup for herself. Others are lagging behind. Chen Shiyi, the young lady of Chen Yunjin's family, a cabinet scholar, walked with Yao Shi beside Xiao Shu. After glancing at Yao Shi, who didn't know what she was thinking, her eyes flashed slightly, and then she said lightly to Xiao Shu, although I haven't seen Her Royal Highness the eldest princess much, it's rare to see her treat anyone so well. This second girl of the Jiang family is just putting on makeup for her, how can she be worthy of the princess doing this to her? Chen Shi didn't go to Qingyu and Bafu, so naturally she didn't know. But Xiao Shu was present throughout the whole process. She played with a delicate incense fan in her hand, and only laughed between her eyebrows, not like Chen Shiyi, who was faintly jealous, but looked very casual. If it's just putting on makeup, of course it won't be like this. What matters is what I said at the time. This kind of thing, Shiyi, you and I can't say it in this life. Chen Shiyi was thoughtful. Asterisk. Because it was the first time for everyone to get together on this occasion, it was the first day to enter the palace, and in the evening, everyone had finished freshening up and eating, and I didn't know who started it, so they called out to gather in the flowing water pavilion used by Yang Hizai to read and drink tea for everyone alone. Zhang Xuning was not interested. You must know that these people didn't talk about any interesting topics in their last life, and the left and right were all those incense powders, heads, and faces, and they died to talk about the young talents outside, and there was really nothing new. Can't stand it, and now everyone thinks she's amazing. Who told her to have a big face on the side of the eldest princess of Liang? When learning etiquette today, everyone saw it in their eyes, although they all felt that her back door was too open, but on the surface, they were more friendly to her, although they were all young ladies of the family, not to the point of stammering, but the words were very gentle, and even Yu put away the hostile eyes before when she saw her, and squeezed out a smile from her lips. So she was pulled over by Fang Miao and a few others. 6 or 7 people sat at a round table, and a few of the rest were sitting on the kong by the window, talking to each other, occasionally picking up candied fruit and dried fruit prepared on the plate and eating them. Zhou Baoying even plunged into eating, and no one looked up. However, Xiao Shu seemed to look at Zhang Xuning differently, and when she saw her come in, she nodded and said hello, and smiled. Sister Zhang can be regarded as making a big splash this day. Zhang Xuning was so tired that she could only pull the corners of her mouth and smile, making an embarrassed appearance, as if she didn't know what to reply, and only said, Sister Xiao said that she was laughing. Xiao Shu saw that she never had the intention of talking to anyone, so she didn't want to talk to her anymore, so she simply turned her head to talk to others. Everyone can't help but complain about today's female officer. Yao Rongrong sat in the corner with some cringe, her face flushed. I haven't taught these things much since I was a child, and I am too slow to learn. Fortunately, there is a sister of the Zhang family, who is similar to me. Otherwise, I don't know what to do today. Everyone was stunned when they heard this. Should I say that this girl is stupid, or is she very stupid? You know this kind of thing in your own heart, why do you still pronounce it? There was a sudden silence in the room for a moment. Yu swallowed a melon seed, although her expression didn't dare to be too obvious, but her eyes showed interest in watching the play. Yao Rongrong also reacted for a moment, only to realize that she had said the wrong thing, and remembered Zhang Xuning's face in front of the princess today. She suddenly shrank and hurriedly apologized to Zhang Xuning. What I just said didn't mean that. Zhang Xuning. I am not angry, I just feel sorry for her. She didn't have much to do with Yao Rongrong in her last life, and she had no intention of embarrassing her, so she just smiled casually. It's okay, I'm stupid, I really can't learn well. It's just that Su Shang'ai is too responsible, and it is difficult to learn it over and over again. Fan Yulan was kind-hearted. She originally took a book of poetry from the bookshelf and flipped through it in her hand, but when she saw Yao Rongrong in embarrassment, she interjected and said, the etiquette in the palace seems to be learned for 2 days, right? But at the beginning, the palace said that we would stay for 3 days when we entered the palace for the first time. I heard that on the last day, the gentlemen were going to come to us with questions to see how well they were knowledgeable, so as to determine the content and depth of the lectures in the future. I just don't know which gentleman will take the test at that time. Who else could there be? Xie Juan. Zhang Xuning sneered in her heart. Sure enough, Chen Shiyi, who was very quiet before, replied, "It should be young Master Xie. Now he is presiding over the feast in the palace, and he is very knowledgeable, and this time he wants to teach me to learn the piano and read, and other gentlemen are the only ones who look forward." When I entered the palace, my father told me, saying that entering the palace this time is not equivalent to being able to read for the princess, in addition to learning etiquette, but also to be able to learn the gentleman. It doesn't matter if it's too good, if it's too bad, it's not good to arrange a lecture for Mr. Yu to stay with the princess, and if you speak deeply, you can't understand it, and if you speak slowly, it will drag down Her Royal Highness the eldest princess. Therefore, the school on the third day is also used to select people. If it is not suitable at that time, he will also be persuaded to quit by his husband. This is the second plan that Zhang Xuning is going to change. Because of the changes in Su Shanghai and Princess Liang, seeing that she was pretending to be stupid no matter what, she could pass it even if she was lying on the ground, so naturally she was persuaded to leave the palace because she couldn't learn etiquette. But the eldest princess of Liang can't handle it. As long as she can break through her bottom line in the examination on the third day, hand in a blank paper or write blindly, she will inevitably anger Xie or other gentlemen who never lower their requirements in this regard. Then being persuaded to return to the palace because of poor knowledge is a sure thing. As soon as Xie was mentioned, the young ladies of the family suddenly became a little excited. One said, "It can't really be Mr. Xie coming in person, right?" Yu quipped, "What are you doing with your blushing?" He took a bite of her, covered his face, and said, "If you see it one day, you will blush too." Yao Rongrong answered timidly, "I have heard my father mention Mr. Xie many times at home, but they all said that Mr. Xie will have 4 more years and will be there, but he has always been alone, and he does not talk about marriage, but it is really strange." Fang Miao suddenly raised his head, "What's so strange about this?" Yao Rongrong let out a soft ah. Fang Miao lowered his head again to arrange the copper plates on the table, as if he wanted to count something, and only said, "Most of the people in Beijing know that although Mr. Xie was born in Confucianism, in recent years, he has devoted himself to the study of the Buddha. Not close to women?" At the mention of this, Zhang Xuning couldn't help but think of the embarrassment of her previous life. At this time, all kinds of vicious thoughts came out in my heart. What do you say about being pure-hearted and lacking desires? But there is not even a woman around people in a high position, so what can't you do if you can't keep it? The crowd was joking and laughing at themselves. Suddenly, a little palace maid bowed outside the door and gently called Zhang Xuning, "Second girl Zhang, someone is looking for you." Zhang Xuning suddenly raised her eyebrows, and subconsciously asked, "Who?" The little maid blinked her eyes and looked at her without speaking. Zhang Xuning remembered the events of the previous life, and suddenly understood in her heart, and she didn't ask any more, but only said to the others, "I'm out of company, I'll go out and have a look." Then he followed the little palace maid out of the Yangzhizai, all the way to the direction of the Wenhua Palace. Seeing that he was about to reach the range of the previous dynasty, fortunately he stopped at the fork in the road not far in front of the road, and when he looked up again, Yan Lin was wearing a dark robe, standing under the begonia waiting for her. The little palace maid quietly retreated. Zhang Xuning stepped forward, "It's so late, and you haven't returned from the palace yet." Yan Lin heard some things about the eldest princess's companions learning etiquette from Shenju today, and she was afraid that she had suffered some grievances, so she came to take a look, and looked at her carefully at this moment, and said, "The palace gate will not be under the key for a while, and I really can't rest assured that you will enter the palace when you return to the palace. I heard that Su Shanghai, who taught you today, was very strict, and you fell in front of the eldest princess." "Oh, I just went to the hospital to ask for medicine, remember to put it on at night, don't go into the palace and turn around and be lame. I don't want a bride like that. Before I knew it, I said something about a child. Zhang Xunning's face was as usual. Yan Lin's cheeks turned red, and when he realized that he was Meng Lang again, he couldn't help but cover his lips and cough to cover up, and changed the topic. Are you still used to it today? The medicine he begged for was contained in a white porcelain vial. Zhang Xuning held it in his hand coldly, raised his eyes to look at the young man in the night, and said, I'm still used to it, and the eldest princess takes good care of me, you don't have to worry. Yan Lin specially told Shen Zai, and he was relieved when he heard it. A light smile tugged at his lips, and he looked at her with a different look. It's like grabbing the tail of a fishy cat. He only urged narrowly to say, at the end of today's Wenhua Hall Day lecture, I met Lord Shilang. This should be Zhang Boyu. Zhang Xuning didn't understand what he meant, and looked at him with a wink. Yan Lin raised his eyebrows and said, he asked me, did he teach you some way to treat people a while ago, so that you could take a copy of Kindergarten Kyanglin and pretend to be a disobedient subordinate in the whole house? I thought about whether I should be asked about it for no reason, and it didn't seem like a bad thing, so I accepted it. But I know, I didn't teach. Zhang Xuning lowered her eyes, I just knew that you would lie for me, so I pushed it on you. Yan Lin smiled and scratched the bridge of her nose, only asking, who taught that? Zhang Xuning said, I figured it out myself. Yan Lin stared at her, didn't speak for a while. Under a pair of dark eyes, his gaze flickered slightly, but finally he reached out, touched her head, and said, my Ning Ning has a secret. B. Your Ning Ning has a secret. It's just this secret, she will never dare to tell you. Zhang Xuning only raised her eyes to look at him again. Her eyes were black and white, as transparent and beautiful as glass beads, but she didn't speak. Yan Lin said, then when you want to tell someone one day, tell me, okay? I want to be the first person in the world to know Ning Ning's secret. The young man looked at her with infinite tolerance. Zhang Xuning had a soft heart for a moment. However, the memory is churning in the previous life when he walked into his dormitory with a full body of wine, and the fingers holding the white porcelain medicine bottle tightened slightly, but after all, he nodded and said, okay. Yan Lin was satisfied, the little unhappiness before suddenly dissipated. Just looking at the time is not early, and he is afraid of missing the time of the palace gate, so he reluctantly said, you have been learning the rules these days, but I am afraid that I will be tested by Mr. for school knowledge, and I will not come to you clearly. See you here tomorrow or at this time. I'm going to inquire about what you're going to do on the third day, so that you can be prepared and I'll give it to you when the time comes. Zhang Xuning was speechless. She actually remembers a lot of what she took in the test in the previous life, but it doesn't make a difference if she knows it in this life, because she doesn't plan to let herself live it at all. But she did not refuse the boy's kindness at the moment. Still said, okay.
星后
The next day, people from the Shanghai Bureau came. It's just that this time it was not a simple etiquette to teach, but a name for various people in the palace, and even taught the craft and techniques of blending and making incense. Everyone thought that Zhang Xuning should be just as clumsy today. But I never expected that today's Zhang Xuning seemed to have suddenly opened her mind. She could learn anything, and she could learn anything quickly. The names of various people in the palace can be recited backwards after only 3 repetitions. The rules of walking and retreating, just watch the female official demonstrate once, and you can remember it completely. Not to mention incense making. Smelling the incense, distinguishing the incense, blending the incense, burning the incense, turning the slender hand, doing it as the head is the way, and every action can be called a flowing water, pleasing to the eye. Su Shanghai, who was tossed enough because of Zhang Xunning's etiquette yesterday, didn't come with any hope today, just thinking that there was really no way to listen to the words of the eldest princess, and let her be spared lightly. But who would have thought that this second girl Zhang would seem to be a different person? Others may not notice it, but she stood in front of Zhang Xuning and saw it clearly. When Zhang Xuning picked up the ebony incense seal, she raised her little finger slightly, used the incense spoon to pluck the incense ash onto the incense seal, and then hit it on the paved ashes. It was impartial and upright. This incense seal is just blooming in the heart of the flower facing the front. On the other hand, although the action is correct, most of the incense seals that fall do not pay attention to the direction. Some are upside down, some are crooked. Although most people who make incense do not pay attention to the fact that the incense seal should be placed properly, the peony is beautiful and fragrant, and it has always been the favorite thing of the queen of every dynasty, so Su Shanghai will pay great attention to it when she plays the incense seal. I didn't expect Zhang Xuning to have such a good blue heart and be able to notice such tiny details. Su Shanghai suddenly couldn't help but look at her with a new kind of gaze, and after she finished the incense seal, she said slowly, "Her Royal Highness the eldest princess has blue eyes for you, and there is really a reason. I think there are some people in the world who are born with uncoordinated limbs, and they have to wrestle even when they walk on flat ground. The second girl may be one of them. But it was a good day. Especially incense making. It should be the first." Zhang Xuaningbo was not surprised. In her previous life, she learned etiquette from Su Shanghai, and later she was in the palace for so long, so if she wants to do it, she can naturally do it better than others. Not to mention making incense. This is one of the few hobbies she had in her last life other than being a queen. As for peony, she herself is the queen. Can she not care? It's just that of course she can't say this in front of Su Shanghai right now. She only said, the courtiers are partial to this way, so they have done some research, and today in front of Lord Shanghai, they are showing off. Su Shanghai was already impressed by her. Listening to her say this, she was only modest, and her tone when she spoke was naturally gentle compared to yesterday's reluctance, and said, "Today's girl has finished learning everything, and she is the earliest, so you can rest on the side and look at others." Others. It is said that feng shui turns in turns, why can't it be transferred to them? Yesterday, Zhang Xuning was slow to learn, and Su Shanghai tolerated her in every way. Today she learned quickly like a ghost, and Su Shanghai praised her in every way. Now I'm still sitting on the side and resting. They simply couldn't figure it out. How could they learn so quickly, remember so well, and do so well? Zhang Xuning is really impatient to deal with it today, since she knows that there is no way to let herself leave the palace in terms of etiquette, and if she pretends to continue, it is just to find hardship for herself, so it is better to finish it in the fastest time, or sit aside to rest, saving yourself a stinky sweat. As for what others think, she doesn't care. Who can open the eyes of heaven and guess that she is reborn? It is just like Su Shanghai to find a reason for her that her limbs are not naturally coordinated and she may have been too nervous yesterday. Yao Rongrong was the worst and slowest learner except for Zhang Xuning yesterday. She thought that Zhang Xuning would be scolded with her today, and she felt that the two of them were suffering from the same disease. But in the blink of an eye, Zhang Xuning had finished sitting down. But she was still standing in the crowd, completely becoming the slowest and stupidest of all people. She was at a loss for a while, and only looked at Zhang Xuning with an envious and surprised gaze, and secretly felt a little bitter. Shenzai thought that the content of today's study would be more complicated, so she went to the Queen Mother's Shaoan Palace early and invited Guoan to come to Yang's his eyes side, but as soon as she walked in, she saw Zhang Xuning sitting on the side. When I asked, I found out that she had finished her studies. Looking at her for a while, I was a little moved in my heart, and stepped forward to take Zhang Xuaning's hand, and said with a smile, I knew that Ning Ning would not be a stupid person, but she completed it so quickly, and she worked so hard yesterday, presumably to not disappoint me. Ning Ning, you're so nice. Zhang Xuaning. Now tell Shen Zai that everything she does has nothing to do with her. Will she be dragged down and beaten immediately? Zhang Xuaning didn't dare to take the risk after all, so she acquiesced. At this time, she only sighed in her heart. Fortunately, she will take the school examination tomorrow, and she will be able to leave the palace if she fails the exam. Otherwise she will now directly pray that God will simply send down the thunder and chop herself to death. Chapter 27, Zhang Shat. After entering the palace, I learned the rules for 2 days in a row. I looked tired, and I was fasting all day long, so I shouldn't have been shopping around the palace, right? Shen Zai had a smile on her face, and suddenly remembered something, and turned her head to look at the other people on the side. You too, right? Although everyone was elected to the palace, they had no contact with the eldest princess of Liang, and they were stunned when they heard her question. Only Xiao Shu was familiar with her, and replied with a smile, none of them are there. They are used, not we. The small details of her words show her familiarity with this palace, and unlike the others, she does not mean to put herself in the same place as everyone else. Shen Zai clapped her hands and said, after all, you have almost learned the etiquette, and tomorrow Mr. Xie will take the school to test your knowledge, and I don't know how many people will be able to pass. Since you have entered the palace, you can't come in vain. This princess will take you to visit the royal garden today. Everyone's eyes suddenly became pleasantly surprised. Shen Zai pulled Zhang Xuaning with one hand, and Xiao Shu with the other, and said directly to Su Shanghai, Auntie, Shu and I will take them out for a walk, so I won't study today. Su Shanghai looked at the princess who grew up with him, and there was never any way or principle, so he only said, Ben has almost learned, it's okay for His Highness to take them out for a walk, just don't play too late. You can sleep lazily tomorrow, and you ladies will have to take the academic test tomorrow. Shen Zai agreed, I know. Then he went out happily, and was surrounded by this large crowd and went to the Imperial Garden. The Imperial Garden is in the northwest direction of Yangtze, along the palace wall of each palace to the north, and then turn a few turns to the west. You can see it from afar. The court in the afternoon was exceptionally quiet. Although it is already late autumn, the flowers and trees in the north are nearly withered, but the gardeners in the palace do not dare to be sloppy at all, and still plant the seasonal moon season and potted chrysanthemums in this imperial garden. Some are pruned without vines and branches, and some are placed on the ground in a staggered manner, which has a rare Jiangnan charm. In particular, a tree planted in the east corner of the imperial garden next to the palace wall, although it is not yet the flowering season, only the branches can be seen sparsely, but the form has a bit of slanted beauty. Fan Yulan was quite good at this, and couldn't help but praise. It is said that in order to prevent water from going away in the palace, trees are generally not planted. Unexpectedly, there was a plum tree. Shen Zai looked at it and said with a smile, this is a special case in the palace. It was planted by the circular machine master and Mr. Xie 3 years ago who lost a bet, and it has caused a lot of criticism. Trees are planted in the palace, and the wood is in the wall, which is a sleepy word. Unlucky. Even though the person who planted the tree was a circular machine monk, he also encountered a lot of resistance, but Xiaowei won the gamble and was happy to watch the play next to him. This circular knitting master was the first monk to be an official in this dynasty. Zhang Xuaning was deeply impressed by him. Because when I saw this person in my previous life, I didn't have the slightest appearance of a monk. Born burly, with a pair of upside-down triangular eyes, not only does not have the compassion and peace of Buddhism, but has a bit of ferocity, even when laughing, it gives people a full sense of success. Outsiders said that he and Xie Wei sat down and discussed, and the relationship was very good. But Zhang Xuning judged it according to the clues in his previous life, and the two of them were only afraid that their faces and hearts would be discordant, and they secretly beware of fighting each other. Until she killed herself, the circular machine monk was still on the run, and I don't know if she was killed by Xie Wei in the end. At this moment, when she heard Shen Zai suddenly mention the circular machine, she followed everyone's eyes and glanced at the plum tree in the corner, pondering the fate of this great monk in his previous life. But it was a coincidence, just as she turned her gaze, a group of people came from the far side of the palace wall. If you look closely, the person at the front is wearing a python robe. Who is Shen Zhu, not the king of Linzi? He was followed by several eunuchs, who seemed to be coming from the direction of the harem and were going to go out of the palace through the imperial garden. Shen Zai's eyes lit up as soon as she saw him, and she beckoned to him from afar, "Brother Wang, Brother Wang." Shen Zhu originally went to the Empress Dowager's palace to ask for peace, and was about to leave the palace. When he heard this voice, he raised his head, and when he saw that it was Shen Zai, a faint smile appeared on his elegant face, and said, "Zai, why are you here?" Shen Zai pointed to the people behind him and said, "Take my companions to visit the imperial garden." Shen Zhu looked in the direction of her finger. Sure enough, it's a group of girls. At the front is Xiao Shu, the eldest lady of the Qinqiu mansion, and Shen Zhu has seen it a few times, but the one not far from Xiao Shu is changed out of the previous men's clothes, changed to a light purple dress, stood in the crowd. The figure is delicate and slender, the skin is fine and white, the neck is slender, the cherry lips are ruddy, there are no eyebrows that were deliberately drawn, the eyebrows of the distant mountains are faint, and there is really an indescribable beauty and charm between the eye waves. Shen Zhu felt shocked when he glanced at it. At this time, I thought that if it weren't for Yan Lin's warning, I knew that the second girl was the girl he was going to marry in the future, but I was afraid that he might not be able to move a man's dirty thoughts about women when he saw it. When Xiao Shu saw him, she was originally going to step forward to salute. After all, I've seen it in the past. But when she raised her eyes, she saw that Shen Zhu's gaze easily crossed over her, and actually fell on Zhang Xuning next to her, and stayed for a while, and her heart sank slightly. If you want to bow again, you have missed the best time. Shen Zai didn't notice it yet, pulled Shen Zhu's sleeve, and showed off to him, "How about it, the posture of my group of companions is not smaller than when you and the imperial brother were princes, right?" Shen Zhu smiled, yes, who has the style of our eldest Princess Liang?" Shen Zai snorted, "You only had 1 or 2 companions back then, and I have 12 here. Well, what is this?" When she spoke just now, she only played with Shen Zhu's wide sleeves, but she turned the cuffs out, and with an inadvertent hook of her fingers, she actually hooked out a light cyan embroidered handkerchief. Shen Zhu was stunned for a moment, and reached out to take it back. "Give it to me." Shen Zai's eyes widened, and she immediately dodged away, and looked carefully, and there was a stem of orchid embroidered on her light blue face, and there was a small red ginger flower on one corner. So he sighed twice and pushed it narrow. "Brother Wang, this doesn't look like something for you stinky men. Which girl's family?" Shen Zhu frowned, his face was slightly red. He stepped forward, pulled the embroidered handkerchief back, and stuffed it back into his sleeve indiscriminately, only said, "You are young, what nonsense are you talking about?" Shen Zai stuck out her tongue, "I'm almost 20 years old, I don't have a princess at the age of 23 or 4, I'm just afraid that the royal brother will worry about you." Just tell me, if you like it, but you can't wipe off your face, I'll help you talk to the royal brother. Shenju is a very thin-faced person. Was teased by my sister like this, and I was even more embarrassed. After he stuffed the embroidered handkerchief, he forced a face and said, "Don't go. Today, it was just found out that the silk boat overturned on the Cao River was the collusion of officials and businessmen to raise the price of silk, and just because of the dispute between the three law divisions and Jinyue, the criminal department gave the matter, and almost threw people into prison, and even Mr. Xiet and several elders couldn't persuade him. You still have to bother the imperial brother for this kind of trivial matter. I'm afraid it's not to hit the tip of the knife. Give Brother Wang a face, don't make trouble." Shen Zai pursed her lips. Of course she wouldn't really take this embroidered handkerchief and go to Shen Lang to talk nonsense, but seeing Brother Wang's nervous appearance, she felt a little funny, so she just said, "Okay, what Brother Wang says is what it is. Anyway, I don't understand the things in the court, the left ear goes in and the right ear goes out, and I don't know if I was coaxed by the imperial brother." Shenju was angry. Seeing that there were many young ladies of the family who accompanied him to watch, he was even more embarrassed at this time, and hurriedly dropped a sentence, "I left the palace first, and left in a hurry." This posture is clearly a desert escape. Shen Zai almost couldn't stand up with a smile when she saw it. But the expressions of the others are different. Others may not recognize the embroidered handkerchief, but Xiao Shu just stood close, clearly saw the red ginger flower embroidered on the corner of the embroidered handkerchief, and remembered the glance that Shenju glanced at Zhang Suining, and the fingers holding the delicate incense fan slowly tightened. She turned her eyes and looked at Zhang Suining. This time the look was different from any previous one. Zhang Suining is in her heart. Shenju and Zhang Suiwei have already crossed paths at this time, and this embroidered handkerchief can be regarded as a token between the two, but she was given the opportunity to impersonate her in the previous life. If she doesn't interfere in this life, I don't know what will happen to the two. Looking at Shenju's expression, it seemed that he was indeed a little serious. However, this matter just flashed in her mind, and her mind turned to the matter of the Akaohi silk boat that Shenju had just said. It turned out that the silk boat capsized because someone premeditated. In this way, in the previous life, Yu Fangyan happened to use all the money to buy raw silk before the accident and wait for the price to rise, which made sense. Maybe she had accidentally gotten some news. As for this life, the face of Mu Neo Fangyan passed through his mind again. Zhang Suining sighed lightly in her heart, and couldn't help shaking her head, but she didn't pay attention to Xiao Shu's eyes next to her, but turned her eyes to look at Yao Shi, who was standing a little later. This young lady of the Ministry of Shangshu has been having a sullen face for 2 days in a row. Even when Fang Miao and the others tell jokes to make everyone lean forward and lean back, she only sits on the side and does not laugh at all. When Zhang Suining looked over, her whole complexion was even worse. His hands were folded in front of him, holding an embroidered handkerchief. But it can be seen that the fingers are very hard, and the nails dyed with impatience juice are pink and delicate, but they are too sharp on the silk embroidered handkerchief, and there are traces of it. Zhang Suining's brows slowly wrinkled unconsciously. Asterisk. When I was strolling around in the imperial garden, it was okay, but I said goodbye to the eldest princess and went back to Yangzhizai with everyone. Yao Shi threw herself directly on the couch in her house and cried. It was very sad. When the companions saw her return, their faces were not right, and they all looked at each other at this time. No matter how you say it, it's all under the same roof, and it's not good not to care. But when she cried, it was hard to bother. So I had to make tea in the Liashui pavilion first, put dried fruit preserves, and when I heard the crying in the room gradually stopped, a Fang Miao, who could make people happy, and Chen Shiyi, who acted calmly, coaxed people out and sat down. Yao Shi's beautiful apricot eyes were already crying red, and a lot of makeup had been spent, and there was a sluggish gloom between her eyebrows, as if there were thousands of grievances and grievances. Everyone told her to speak out, and everyone could come up with ideas about anything. She said, "I just heard His Royal Highness the King of Linzi talk about the matter in the Imperial Garden, so I cried. Some people don't understand, the criminal department gives the matter." Chen Shiyi knew a little about it, and only said, "Is the family matter decided?" Yao Shi almost choked up again, and said, "Settle down half. But how can he be worthy of me in the matter with a 7th-grade criminal department? He was not born in the imperial examination, but was admitted to the imperial court by a white body official. A vulgar widow in the family, old and ugly. Originally, my father said that the official character in the criminal department was not high, but he was a close minister of the Son of Heaven. That's why I was moved and agreed to this family business. But now, the Holy One almost threw him into prison. I heard that this man always liked to deal with the dead when he was investigating cases in the Yamen, and his temperament was extremely strange, and he was by no means a person who was easy to get along with. Now that Jin Yiwei is powerful, he has also offended Jin Yiwei. What future does such a person have? When I got married, I had to serve his mother, put up with his strange temperament, and maybe go to prison with him. Why? Only then did everyone understand that it was the criminal department who had recently stirred up a storm in the court, Zhang Shat. Because of him, the saint removed 1,000 households surnamed Zhou from Jin Yiwei. Yao Shi actually discussed marriage with him. For a while, everyone didn't know what to say. Xiao Shu frowned slightly and said, "But the relatives are all discussed." Zhang Xuning sat aside, listening to Yao Shi's cry, but her eyes fell on the big fish tank in front of the bogo shelf, looking at the goldfish moving in the lotus leaves, lowering her eyes, and she didn't know what she was thinking. Yao Shi gritted his teeth, the resentment in his eyes became more obvious, and under the shaking candle in the house, which was not too bright, it actually showed a little gloomy and terrible, and only said, "It is precisely because I am discussing that I am unwilling. But now that the gang posts have been changed, if I want to regret it, it is inevitable that people will say that my Yao mansion is snobbish. Now it's not embarrassing or embarrassing, it's not good to marry, and it's not good not to marry. And that Zhang She has already discussed 2 relatives before, but he has privately agreed to withdraw from the marriage for life, and one died before he passed the door. This time he finally attached to the lintel of my Yao mansion, and he will not take the initiative to withdraw from his family. My father is a member of the first rank of the dynasty, and I am the daughter of a dignified family. How can I marry such a person?" Zhang Xuning almost sneered when she heard it. "Zhang She rarely clings to the lintel of your Yao mansion?" Nau heard the word Zhang Shat, but she subconsciously glanced at Zhang Xuning, couldn't help but cover her lips with her hands, smiled lightly, and only said to Yao Shi, "What is there to worry about such a trivial matter? Sister Yao's mind is inevitably too dead. There are so many roads in the world, and there are so many ways, so why do you have to leave the family surnamed Zhang? What does it matter if your house retreats first? As long as you find the right reason, no one can say anything." All eyes fell on her. Yao Shi also raised his head to look at her in surprise, and when he saw that it was Yu from Qing Yuan Bafu, he subconsciously frowned for a while. He looked at this person on weekdays, but now he heard that she seemed to have a way, so he said, "What reason?" "Qing Yuan Bafu is in decline, and this trip was finally selected to enter the palace, and Yu's heart is actually more eager than anyone else." At this time, even the previous quarrel with Zhang Xuning was because of Zhang Sha was forgotten, and Zhang Xuning's father Zhang Boyu was only a waiter, but Yao Shi, who she wanted to please, was the daughter of the secretary of the Ministry of Rights and a bachelor in the cabinet, so how could she be afraid of Zhang Suning? So she laughed. Said unhurriedly at the moment, if it is really as Sister Yao said, this cover has not been completed twice, it can be seen that he has no wife in his life, and the second family died before he became an adult. What is this called? Isn't this just a hard wife? Yao Shi was stunned for a moment, and muttered, but his fiancée has been frail and sick since she was a child, and she died of illness because of the wind and cold at that time. Yu sneered, why is Sister Yao's brain so rigid? No matter what, people are dead anyway. If you want to withdraw from your family, you just need to say that Zhang Sha's wife is the fate of the lonely star, and whoever marries him will not die well. In this way, who dares to say that your Yao mansion is not doing well? And now that the situation is here, even if Lord Lingzun cherishes his talent, he thinks that this person is good, but if he hears too many such words, how can he not cherish his daughter? Yao Ji Lao said everything in the court, and even the saint has to sell him a few thin noodles. If that Zhang doesn't know what to do, he is against Lord Yao, can he still not be cured? Yes. Zhang Zhan was born in the official examination, and was exceptionally promoted because he was good at breaking the prison, and he has been appointed so far, but he has no fame in the imperial examination, and it is difficult to move an inch above the government and the opposition. As long as she can come up with a reasonable reason to persuade her father well, with her father's love for her, what can she not get rid of this family business? Yao Shi pinched the jinsa, his eyes flickering. Zhang Shui glanced at Yao Shi quietly, and then at Yu, who glanced at her demonstratively after she finished making an idea, and quietly clenched her palms. I still remember the first time I met Zhang Shat in the summer resort. She took the palace maid to the lake to enjoy the lotus. I didn't think about it, the July weather was childish, and the afternoon rain was pouring down, and it was coming. I had to hurriedly go to the cool pavilion next to it to take shelter from the rain. When I arrived, I found that there was already a person sitting inside, and a small eunuch was standing aside, as if waiting for someone. The man, dressed in the official robe of a three-rank civil official, sat on a stone bench next to the round table in the pavilion, with one hand on the table and the other hanging down on his right knee, quietly watching the heavy rain outside the pavilion. Tea was brewed on the table, and there was water vapor accompanied by the fragrance of tea. The rain outside the pavilion was noisy. This corner of the pavilion seems to have been abandoned by heaven and earth, and there is a kind of peace and tranquility for no reason. Zhang Suning was stunned for a moment before walking in. She was wearing a palace dress, with phoenixes flying and peonies on her skirt. The little eunuch saw her first, bowed hurriedly, and said, "Meet Niang Niang Chitos." When the man saw her, he immediately got up, hurriedly buried his head, and bowed. Weikan Zhang Sha pays a visit to the queen. Zhang Sha. As soon as this surname came out, she raised her eyebrows. Zhou Yinzi did things for her for a while, Jin Yiwei fought for power with the three law divisions, and Zhang Sha was the new squire of the criminal department, and he was working against Zhou Yinzi everywhere, so that thoughtful people like Zhou Yinzi lost their normality, and overturned the table case in the Zhenfu division, and they jumped like thunder. Therefore, she didn't see this person, but she had heard of it for a long time. At the moment, his eyes wandered, and he looked him up and down, and then he smiled and said, flat, "Master Zhang doesn't have to be polite." She was going to say a few words to this man. But I didn't expect this person to be expressionless, and after flattening down, he said directly, "Zhang Zhan is a foreign minister, so he doesn't dare to disturb Niang Niang Fengjia." Then he withdrew from the pavilion and stood at the foot of the steps outside the pavilion. It was still raining heavily, and as soon as he went out, he was drenched in the rain for a few moments. The little eunuch was startled. The reason why Zhang Xia was waiting in the pavilion was that there were eunuchs by his side. It should be that Shen Ju wanted to summon him, but he hadn't come yet. The little eunuch didn't dare to let the court officials drench like this, so he took the umbrella next to him and opened it and went outside to put it on him. Unexpectedly, Zhang Xuning suddenly sneered, and said, "Give it to me." She was the queen at that time, who didn't hold, coax, and pet her when they saw her? This mask avoids himself like a snake and scorpion. And there are still grievances and strife from the previous dynasty. How can she make this person feel better? So he only took the umbrella from the little eunuch's hand, and walked to the pavilion unhurriedly, because it was still in the pavilion, higher than the steps, so it was still a little higher than Zhang Xia, but he didn't give Zhang Xia an umbrella. He just played with the handle of the umbrella and watched the rain trickle over his cold and hard silhouette. Zhang Xia's face was born without a smile, his lips were extremely thin, and his eyelids were also extremely thin, so when he raised his eyes slightly to look at her, his eyes were like thin blades, and a slight stroke could make traces in the bottom of people's hearts. Zhang Xuning smiled, "Why do you hide when you see this palace? Are you afraid that this palace will eat you?" Zhang Xia pursed his lips and said nothing. Zhang Xuning felt more and more in his heart that he didn't know each other. I heard that Lord Zhang was very capable in the previous dynasty, and even now the Jinyi guard has to suffer under the hands of the adult. This palace has known that adults have been known for a long time, but I didn't think about it, and I only saw today. Her voice was pleasant, but there was a bit of sarcasm hidden in her words. The rain was noisy and the water mist was hazy. Zhang Xia looked at her, withdrew his gaze, still didn't say a word, and turned around to leave. I was just about to take a step, but I found that I couldn't walk. He turned his head and saw. For he had stood on the steps, and the corner of his robe was on the steps above, soaked by the rain, and he was now being trampled by a cocked head embroidered with silver thread and noir. Zhang Xuning deliberately teased him, not knowing that he was stepping on it, and asked him, "Why didn't Master Zhang leave?" Zhang Xia looked at her fixedly for a moment, and then leaned down in the rain, and actually pulled the corner of the official robe and pulled it hard. Shhhh. The sound of cracking silk was a little harsh and frightening in the rain. He directly tore apart the corner that Zhang Xuning was stepping on, and then got up again, and said to her without humility or arrogance, "Don't dare to move your shoes." However, Wycan also has a word to give to the mother. You must know that people are greedy for their profits, and the tiger seeks skin, but I don't know that the tiger is born with its ferocity, and it will not change because of things. If you seek skin with a tiger today, he will be devoured by a tiger tomorrow. Mother, do it yourself. Zhang Xia said, turned around and left. Zhang Xuning was extremely angry, and threw down the umbrella in his hand, and the open umbrella turned around twice in the rain, and was beaten by the rain. The little eunuch in the pavilion was frightened. At that time, she thought, how can there be such a person in the world who does not know what is good or bad? Later, I learned that Zhang Xiazu was a person who couldn't know what to do. His temper is stinky and hard, and no one scolds him or she will change it. She really didn't think she took what she said that day, but how many times after she went back and couldn't sleep late at night, these words had to float from the depths of her memory. Because the people around her either ask for her, or are interested in her, or are subject to her, they will never say such things to her. How did she know that she was not seeking skin with a tiger? Horses of courses. In the previous life, in order to be the queen, others were loyal to her, and she couldn't listen to it, so she knew that it was wrong, and she had to make a mistake to the end. Didn't expect that it would eventually tire him. Since he was reborn, he hasn't seen Zhang Xia, but he has seen his fiancée first. The night was dark, and the candles were shaking. When Yu finished her idea, she smiled proudly on the side. Yao Shi slowly clenched her fingers, her face was gloomy and frosty, and she seemed to be about to make a decision. Zhang Xuning suddenly thought, if a person lives in the world, if he wants to be a good person, he must be extremely tired. To endure, to give, to refrain from restraint, to be humble, or not to conflict with others. It's so unpleasant to be a bad guy compared to being a bad guy. Although being a bad guy will eventually pay the price of being a bad guy, according to her experience in her previous life, no matter what the final result is, at least the moment of being a bad guy is extremely happy and even hearty. Second Miss Yu. Zhang Xuning got up, as if she hadn't heard their plans in the matter of Zhang Sha today, and paced to the side of the fish tank she had been staring at, watching a few goldfish swim slowly in this waist-high fish tank, and then called. Please move, I suddenly have a few words to say to you. She had a peaceful smile on her face, and she couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. Yu guessed that she was a little annoyed because of her idea, but now that she was in the palace, and there were so many people watching, she was really not afraid of her, but wanted to appreciate her ugly expression up close for a while. So he laughed and walked over to her. The room was quiet for a while, and everyone's eyes fell on the two of them. As soon as Yu approached, she said, if you have anything to say, you can say it. However, she never expected that when she walked to the front of the big fish tank with goldfish, Zhang Xuning, who had been standing next to her, stretched out her hand without warning, pressed her head, grabbed someone and pressed it into the white porcelain fish tank. Yu suddenly screamed. But Zhang Xuning suddenly attacked, and the force was extremely ruthless. How could she break free in a panic? At one point, the whole head was buried in the water. Everyone in the room was startled and exclaimed. The candied fruit that Zhou Baoying had just held was sprinkled on the table, and Fang Miao directly covered her mouth. Even Xiao Shu's face changed, and she suddenly got up. At this time, where could Zhang Xuning's face still see the kindness of the previous half? The whole person didn't smile at all, his anger grew, his expression was as if he was frozen by ice and snow, and he just pressed the person into the water with an expressionless face, and Ren Yuya struggled and didn't move. The splash of water stained the hem of her clothes, and she didn't even look at it. It wasn't until everyone reacted after panicking and was about to rush up to persuade her, that she coldly threw Yu, who had choked on water and had no strength, to the ground. Yu was frightened, and her face was colorless. She trembled and stretched out her hand to point at Zhang Xuning. You. Zhang Xuning lowered her eyebrows and wiped her hands with the jinsa on the side, and only said, how am I? All eyes fell on her. She only laughed flatly, looked down at Yu condescendingly, and said, I bullied you, do you want to sue? But I have the eldest princess and the father who is really lacking in the household, what do you have? Not to mention the now well-known Yan Lin. Yu couldn't believe what she had just encountered, and she couldn't believe that Zhang Xuning had said such a thing arrogantly. She thought she had to refute herself. But facing her angry eyes, she was shivering all over. Zhang Xuning unhurriedly turned her gaze to Yao Shi, who was also frightened on the side, with a shallow brilliance in her deep eyes, and her tone was very peaceful and friendly. The daughter's family in the boudoir has not yet married, so she will take care of the reputation of the bad guy Qingping and ruin people's life. He was so vicious at a young age, how could he be born when he grew up? I'm afraid that no one will dare to marry it. Miss Yao, you said yes, right? Yao Shi came to her senses at this time. She actually had a seizure because of Zhang Sha. I panicked at the bottom of my heart for a while, I was afraid and hated. But he didn't dare to look at her directly, so he only dodged. Zhang Xuning still thought that she dared to use such a vicious trick, How bold was she, and she didn't want to coax one, so she sneered, only folded the gypsies slowly and put it down, and said to everyone, "You guys talk slowly, I'm a little tired, go back to sleep first." Chapter 28 School Examinations. After doing the bad thing of bullying people, Zhang Xuning returned to her house without any psychological burden. What is there to worry about? In order to withdraw from the marriage, a girl's family insists on giving the object of the marriage a reputation of a wife, and the other party is also known for being honest and upright, and I don't know who is unlucky when it comes out. Besides, if they want to make a fuss because of what they did today, let others judge it. Zhang Xuning is still desperate. If she makes a big fuss, won't she be able to leave the palace? Left and right is a surefire deal. On this night, Yan Lin really sent her some exam questions he had asked. Of course, it may not be very complete, but the general direction and which books to take are known. If you read at night, get up tomorrow morning and take a look. It should not be difficult to pass tomorrow's exam. After all, it's just a matter of looking at everyone's knowledge, not really taking a test. The purpose of the school examination is just to weed out some people who are too poor. After Zhang Xuning got it, she glanced at it roughly, and found that there was almost no difference from the previous life, and after reading it, she put these pages on the fire and burned them. Although she doesn't care about herself, if this thing is seen by others, it will inevitably be found on Yan Lin, and it will not sound good to say it. So a good night's sleep. When she got up the next morning, when she had washed and dressed, she pushed open the door of the room, and saw at a glance that early in the morning, there were several young ladies of the family who were outside with books in their books, standing, or sitting, chanting or memorizing in a low voice. Looks like everyone is really trying to stay. Zhang Xuning suddenly felt that she was so lazy, it was really a little out of place. It was probably because she suddenly had an incident with Yu Yu and Yao Shi last night, and everyone heard the door knocking, and when they raised their heads and saw her walk in, there was a little jealousy and fear in their eyes. Only a few people took the initiative to greet her. Among them, Fan Yulan, the only one in this group who did not temporarily cram, even smiled at Zhang Xuning. "Second Miss Zhang is early." "Miss Fan, morning." Fan Yulan is really not fighting or grabbing, she has poetry and books in her belly, and she has the real material, and she is calm at all times. This indifference is something that Zhang Xuning can't envy. She has always been kind to those who show kindness to her, so she also bowed her head and said, "Everyone seems to have gotten up early today, and it seems that they all attach great importance to the academic examination." In the late autumn morning, there is a faint cold mist floating in the sky. Girls dressed in different clothes stood under the porch and read. No matter how you look at it, it's a pleasing picture. Fan Yulan glanced at the others and said, "After all, everyone should have never experienced such a battle in the past, and it is inevitable to be nervous. Even I couldn't sleep well last night, so I got up early in the morning today." However, the second girl Zhang was the same as the previous 2 days, sleeping until dawn, which is really admirable. What is envy and envy that she can sleep? Zhang Xuning was really a little crying and laughing. Sitting on the other side was the rare way to put down all kinds of celestial almanacs today, and picked up a copy of Analects to Na, and after hearing Fan Yulan's words, he interjected sourly, "Where does Miss Fan know? Even if all of us here didn't sleep well last night, it is impossible for second Miss Zhang to sleep badly. The government and the opposition all know that Zhang Shilang is good friends with Mr. Xie, and they also have contacts on weekdays. Miss Zhang doesn't say anything else, she can always know Mr. Xie's preferences, and she also knows what to pay attention to when she takes the school answer sheet for a while, right?" At this point, his voice suddenly paused. Fang Miao finally realized something that he had ignored before, and stood up as soon as he patted his head, and came up to pull Zhang Sunning's hand. Second Miss Zhang. Second Miss Zhang. I actually forgot, you are a person with power. Ahem, what, if it's convenient for you, can you tell me a little about what books Mr. Xia likes to read, and does he have any special preferences when reading papers? Of course, Xia Wei has dealings with Zhang Boyu, but that is all about adults. Zhang Suning is now just an 18-year-old girl who died and said that she was 19 years old. What can she know? If Fang Miao asked this question in the previous life, it was asking the wrong person. It's just that Zhang Suning really knows in this life. Who told her to be reborn and know the contents of the exam paper in advance? When Fang Miao asked this, the sound of reading on the porch was a little quieter for some reason. Zhang Suning noticed that many people looked at her, and her mind moved slightly. Why don't you do this kind of good thing of benefiting others and yourself? The better others do in the exam, the worse she looks. Fang Miao originally tried to ask, but seeing Zhang Suning's eyes flickering, she said in her heart, sure enough, I won't tell you. After all, everyone is considered to be competitive at this time, who wants to help their opponents. If one is accidentally squeezed out, who will cry to? So she sighed, I'd better continue to read my Analects, it's better to hug blindly than not at all. But unexpectedly, Zhang Suning looked at her and laughed, and said to her, the Analects is to be read, if you are still a little empty, it is not bad to read Mencius again. I also want to know that Mr. Xia will not be too difficult to take the school, so let's see what everyone has learned. Therefore, according to the order in which ordinary scholars read, University and Book of Songs also have to be read. My father did have some friendship with Mr. Xia, but I don't know much about his habits, except that Mr. Xia seems to like a good handwriting than a good answer. No matter how good the answer is, if the words are not neat and clear, they will be dethroned by Mr. Xia. Everyone was stunned when they heard this. Some people didn't expect Zhang Suning to say it directly, some people were thinking about whether it was true or false that she said it so easily, and some people were a little skeptical about what she said. Even Zhou Baoying is reading a book today. Her little face was pink and red, and her eyebrows were furrowed, and she looked confused. How could it be? Isn't it the first thing to study, and to cultivate knowledge? If you are deposed just because your handwriting is not good enough, it will be too unfair, right? If there are a lot of questions on the examination paper, it is inevitable that the handwriting will be scribbled in a hurry. Zhang Suning smiled, then I don't know. In the previous life, she didn't have much contact with Xia Wei, and she didn't even have many opportunities to meet, but I heard that when he presided over the scientific expedition, he had excellent knowledge but not good enough words, so he had to throw it down in his hand. The original first class is put into the second class. The original second class was reduced to the third class. Originally, the top three may not have a name or surname. There were many unconvinced scholars in that section, so there was a matter of Shilin asking for a letter to remove Xia Wei from the examination of the president, but Xia Wei did his own thing as usual, and he had no intention of changing it. And then it was over. Why Xia Wei is like this, Zhang Suning doesn't know. Anyway, she said everything she knew, and it was their business whether others believed it or not. Because of Zhou Baoying's question, many people were a little suspicious of Zhang Suning's words. Only Xiao Shu was impressed by Zhang Suning. Because she knew that what Zhang Suning said was true. After all, the Xiao family is powerful in the court, although Xiao Shu is already familiar with the eldest princess and her knowledge is not bad, it is basically impossible to be persuaded to go home at this level. But once it comes to the academic examination, it is a matter of face. Someone has already inquired about the habits and preferences of the prince and young master Xia Wei, among which good writing ranks first. She knew, but never thought to tell anyone else. However, Zhang Xuning actually said it all. Isn't this man half selfish? Xiao Shu felt that she didn't understand her very well for a while, and for a while, she felt that compared to this person's openness, her little caution about wanting to compete for the first place seemed to be inferior. She suddenly had a lot of complexity in her heart. But I don't know that Zhang Xunning's heart is going to bloom happily at this time. These stupid girls must hold the Buddha's feet, take advantage of this time to hurry up and write the book carefully, and write seriously when answering the questionnaire, and the grand cause of leaving the palace and going home early depends on you. Everyone else is hurrying to read the book, but Zhang Xuning feels that life has never been so hopeful. She walked into the Liashui pavilion, wanting to make a pot of tea for herself, and she didn't prepare at all, just waiting for someone to ask them to take the test for a while. It's just that it didn't work out, and as soon as the water was boiled, an uninvited guest came in. Zhang Xuning raised her eyes and looked at it, and her eyebrows couldn't help but raise. Yao Shi. Su was crying yesterday, and she cried even more after Zhang Xuning left, so her eyes were a little swollen, and when she walked in from the outside, her eyes kept falling on Zhang Xunning's body. Dressed in apricot red clothes, it looks good looking in a flash. But Zhang Xuning could feel her unwillingness and anger from the palm she was clenching at her side. Zhang Xuning stretched out her hand, slowly arranged a tea set on the tea tray, and only smiled. Miss Yao, don't worry, we also asked what you said yesterday, and you just said it. Although I am not a good person, I say any grudges to my face, and I don't do such things as slandering people behind my back, so naturally I don't need to worry about me going back and talking nonsense. Yao Shi felt slapped in the face by her again. After all, words and phrases like slander in the back and small words seem to mean something. She took a deep breath and said, I asked myself if I had no grievances with second Miss Zhang, and after I went back last night, I inquired about it, and I didn't think of offending you in any way. If you want to say that there is some discord between the second girl and the second Miss of Neu, it is just against her. But every word you said was clearly aimed at me. I didn't sleep in the middle of the night, and I always felt that this was strange. Even if the girl is uneven, the reaction seems to be too aggressive, but I have to wonder, what is the relationship between Miss Zhang and that Zhang Shat? If you can't figure it out, you have to suspect that there is something between her and Zhang Shat, but if you have a little eyebrows, it will be used as a reason to divorce Zhang Shat. Zhang Xuning is very perceptive. It's just this, if you come to question her in the previous life, she may not be able to have a clear conscience, but if you ask her in this life, now she doesn't even know Zhang Shat, where does the relationship come from? Zhang Xuning leaned forward, used a teaspoon to dial the tea leaves into the pot little by little, and said without changing his face, Lord Zhang Shat is an official, upright. I heard that he was quite famous among the people when he broke out of prison in his early years. Although Xuening is also a villain, she has realized a truth in the past 2 years. Although not everyone in the world can be a gentleman, it doesn't matter if you are a villain. It doesn't hurt to use the villain's way, but if you treat a gentleman, it's best to treat a gentleman in the way of a gentleman. Miss Yao seemed to suspect that there was something between me and Zhang Xiao, but after today, Miss Yao went out to inquire and found out that I had never met the legendary Master Zhang once. If you want to do something from it, you should take a break from it. You feel that this marriage is not good, and it is understandable that you want to quit, and the world seeks advantages and avoids disadvantages, and there is nothing to blame. But some things are overdone, and they are not very good. Miss Yao wants to withdraw from the marriage, but also has no harm to herself. Where in the world is there such a good thing? Second Miss Zhang said it nicely. Yao Shi listened to her tone that had nothing to do with herself, and felt extremely harsh. I only heard that you are also a bad temper in the house, and now you don't have a backache when you stand and talk. I really wait for you to encounter such a thing, to be worthy of such a marriage. I am afraid that you may not be better than me. This is the blood spurting. Jiang Xuning said in her heart that she was the least able to be a person in her previous life, and she clearly told Yan Lin that she wanted to be the queen and that she wanted to marry Shen Zhu, without finding any innocent reasons for herself, let alone pouring dirty water on Yan Lin's body and adding stigma to him. And she fell in love with Shen Zhu before the accident in the Yanji Marquis mansion. Regardless of whether there was an accident behind the home mansion or not, she was going to marry Shen Zhu, and she didn't have the heart to fall into the well. It's just that the two things collided together, and there was a suspicion of falling into the well, which made it worse, which made Yan Lin hate her even more. She raised her eyes to look at Yao Shi's gaze, and suddenly became a little mocking. I see that Miss Yao didn't seem to have any harmful intentions last night, but when she got up today, she seemed to be going to drill the horns of the bull. If I were Miss Yao, first, I would have encountered such a good family affair, and my father, who was a cabinet scholar, thought that this person was good, and it was too late to marry happily, so why was there any need to withdraw from the marriage? Second, I felt that this marriage was not good and wanted to withdraw from the marriage, and I would not want to splash such ugly dirty water as K-wife on people, and how could I turn around and ask people to marry a wife? I simply told people that I wanted to withdraw from this family business, and I would not force that gentleman to come to cover up the righteous person. Third, if I don't want to bear the infamy of snobbery and want to withdraw from the marriage, it is better to stay still and sit at home and wait. Yao Shi couldn't help but secretly hate when she heard the front handkerchief, but when she heard her last sentence, she was suddenly stunned. What do you mean by this? Jiang Xuning was disgusted with Yao Shi at the moment, and the water on the side was boiling, so she said coldly, I'm going to make tea. If Miss Yao doesn't want to sit down and talk to me about tea, don't disturb my purity here. I'm going to take the school exam in a while. Wouldn't it be good to read more books while I have the time? Read more books and don't bully people into poverty. She has experienced a lot in her previous life, and she has learned a little bit, and she can only see that she will marry Zhang Sha in the future. Yao Shi understands if she understands, and it has nothing to do with her if she doesn't understand. Yao Shi said that she didn't give half of her face, and she was angry again. Everyone is rushing away, and she can't stay any longer, so she walks away. But when she walked out, she thought that Liashui Pavilion was not her Jiang Xuning's territory alone. How could she catch up with people as if she was the master? But it would be too disadvantageous to go in again at this time, so I had to endure it.
星后
At about 2 o'clock, Jiang Xuning just finished drinking 2 bubbles of tea, and someone came outside Yang's Hizai. He only said, a few gentlemen have now come from the Wenhua Palace, brought the question papers, and at the beginning of the morning, they will start the examination in the Fengchen Hall next to them, and ask the young ladies to move to the Fengchen Hall with the slaves. So everyone tidied up their appearance and went to Fengchen Hall with the palace people. This hall is not even half a moment away from the Yang's Hizai where the companions live, and it will not take long to arrive. Jiang Xuning raised his eyes, only to see a main hall of this Fengchen Palace. Both sides are side halls with ear rooms, mountain houses. There are no carved beams or painted buildings, most of the doors are only painted with varnish. There are only 5 steps in front of the hall, and the 5 virtues of the saint are said. After entering the hall, it is like a school. At the top is the place where the gentlemen give lectures, and below is the table and chairs are complete, and the desk is equipped with pen, ink, paper, and inkstone. Against the west wall, there are a few square tables and chairs, and there are books and tea tables, which should be used for the gentlemen to rest between the 2 lectures. They each chose their seats and sat down. Zhang Xuning was a little stunned by Xie after all, and directly picked a bookcase in the corner where the light was not very good and looked a little dark, although it may be a bit eye-consuming to write for a while, but it can avoid the eyes of others. Then there was a voice from behind, "Gentlemen, please." The crowd suddenly got up again. Zhang Xuning stood in the corner and looked back, only to see that Xie was wearing a loose green robe, tied his hair with a green hosta, his eyebrows and eyes were not stained, and there was a little usual smile on his lips. There was a young lady from the family who had laughed at others before mentioning Xie's blush, and when she saw it, she realized that the person was not talking nonsense at that time. For a while, many people did not dare to look at it directly. Zhang Xuning glanced at it and immediately lowered her head. It was not that she didn't dare to look at Xie, but hoped that Xie would not notice herself no matter what. She just needed to answer the paper and hand it in, and it was enough to have a sense of presence when he shouted that he was going to get out. It's just that. Xie rolled into the hall with a stack of questions rolled up, and as soon as he put it on the desk, when he raised his eyes, his eyebrows moved slightly. Glanced around the corner again, and then saw Zhang Xuning standing with his head hanging in the dim corner. His unrolled fingers paused slightly. An old Hanlin next to him asked him, "Juan, what's wrong?" Xie only ordered the palace people standing at the entrance of the hall on the side, and said lightly, "In the future, if it weren't for the wind, rain, and scorching sun, the window sash in the east corner would be opened." The palace man immediately responded, "Yes." Then he walked past Zhang Xuning and pushed open the window sash that had been tightly closed. The light of the sky outside suddenly poured in, all of which fell on her body, and also illuminated the table and pen and paper in front of her. At this moment, Zhang Xuning felt that she had nowhere to hide. "I already scolded in my heart. This posture is clearly a suspicion that this palace is going to cheat in the dark. Snort, look at this palace this time to give you a good answer sheet, and teach you what it means to be unlearned and unskilled. I won't be angry with you." Chapter 29, Small Reports. This stack of question papers is prepared in advance. After all, it is only used to explore the knowledge of the princess's companions, and on the whole it is not complicated, and the number required is not large, so the gentlemen have each made a good question and handed it over to someone to copy 12 copies. The text is the same size, the rules are neat, and it is all beautiful pavilion style. After Xie finished speaking, he lowered his head and continued to unwrap the volume. After dismantling it, he counted the number of question papers with slightly lowered eyes, and then asked the 3 old Hanlin who came with him, "How many old men have taken a look?" All 3 stood still, shaking their heads. One of the old Hanlin sighed and said, "A group of little girls are studying, and this examination school is like child's play. What is the purpose of the examination? Isn't it all like that?" Xie glanced at him, didn't say anything, and only handed the question paper to the palace people. The palace people took the question paper with both hands, and then sent it to everyone one by one. Zhang Xuning happened to be the last one. As soon as the question paper was placed in front of her, she quickly went through it. The questions on it were not much different from what she had done in her previous life, and they were also the same as the one that Yan Lin handed her last night. Then I listened to Xie and said, "This examination is just to see what level of knowledge and cultivation you are reading, and the questions proposed by the gentlemen are relatively simple, and the difficulty of answering them is not high. Therefore, the time for answering the questionnaire is only 1.5 hours, and I will ask you to hand in the answer sheet at the right moment. The 3 gentlemen and I would spend 2 moments reading the papers on the spot and making a judgment. Now I invite you to start answering the questionnaire." His voice was flat and unwavering. When it fell on people's ears, there was a feeling of breeze blowing on their faces, perhaps because there was a sense of relief hidden in these words, which easily dissipated the tension when people entered the temple and relaxed slightly. Below, such as Xiao Shu, Fan Yulan, and others, all of whom are well-educated and confident, heard Xie Wei's words. They all dipped their pens in ink, and answered completely on the blank rice paper for the question paper sent down. However, Zhang Xuning stared at the question paper for a long time. After a long time, he stretched out his hand, bent his 5 fingers, like chicken feet, grabbed a small pen next to him, and wrote crookedly and unhurriedly on the answer sheet. At this time, the first few gentlemen had already sat down on the chairs set up on the left, and only asked the palace people to make tea and bring it up. They were all old scholars in the Hanlin Academy, and when they glanced at the 12 little girls who were burying their heads in answering the questionnaire, they couldn't help but shake their heads. The old gentleman who replied to Xie Wei's words said, "A princess wants to study, and the saint invites a few people to teach her, and the daughter's family doesn't need to know anything too big. Listen to her parents at home, marry her husband, and follow her husband to her son, and learn the book of filial piety and women's ring." The old man has been studying diligently in the Hanlin Academy for more than 10 years, and now he has come to teach a group of female dolls. Like what? Xie Wei sat next to him, lowered his eyebrows, took the teacup, lifted the tea lid, and did not answer. However, the 2 gentlemen next to him were a little dissatisfied by these words. One of them also sighed and echoed, "Who says it's not? The old man has been in the office for so many years, and no one has ever asked me to teach a female doll. It's not that I think highly of myself, but I really use a knife to kill chickens. It's just you and me, after all. It's just a few pedantic old men who are unwilling in the courtyard, but like young Master Xie who presides over the feast on weekdays, the saint actually ordered to read and lecture to the princess and these companions, which is really incomprehensible." Young Master Xie actually agreed, which made people even more puzzled. These old gentlemen are all from the Hanlin Academy, and they have their own integrity, that is, the emperor is in front of them, and they don't care about many words. Now they have said all this in the court several times. However, Shen Lang favored the eldest princess and insisted on going her own way, unable to listen to anyone's persuasion. So it's useless to talk about it. Xie Wei had heard them complain in the court, and every time he dragged himself out to talk about it, it seemed that he was also very dissatisfied with this matter. But he doesn't show much emotion about it. At the moment, he only glanced at the ladies of the family who were reading seriously on the side, and his eyes were fixed on Zhang Xuning's posture of holding the pen, and he frowned slightly, blew the tea and took a sip, but said, "All the companions are answering, I'd better say less so as not to disturb it." A few old gentlemen don't have a lot to say now. Historically, the invigilation of the examination room has been very boring. Xie Wei brought a copy of On Keeping White and sat on the side and read it slowly, page by page. The gentlemen could not sit still. The saint ordered them to teach the eldest princess and a group of girls from the family who accompanied them to read, which made them a little dissatisfied, and they sat here for less than 2 moments, unable to speak, and had no intention of reading, so they simply said that they would go outside to breathe, and even threw away the matter of invigilation, and went out from Fengshen Hall together, leaving Xie Wei alone. From beginning to end, Xie Wei didn't even look at them, only flipped through his book. Although Zhang Xuning was sitting in the corner, Fang Cai also listened to the words of those old gentlemen, and saw that these people went out without sitting for a while, and couldn't help frowning for a while. How can you be an old pedant? If you grow old like this, you should be buried in the soil. Even if she doesn't stay to read it as a companion, she must call Shen Zai for the small reports of these bad old men. Chapter 30 Answer Sheet. Thinking of the world she was in the previous life, Yu Fangyan said again, and then thinking about the place she was in, Zhang Xuning didn't know why, and she didn't feel very happy in her heart. So when I buried my head in staring at the questions of these gentlemen again, the more I looked at them, the more unpleasant they became. Originally, she was going to pretend to be a waste who didn't want to be motivated. But now, staring at it, I have a little bit of a desire to raise the bar. I won't stay in the palace anyway, and I'm afraid of offending these old men. Zhang Xunning's slender fingers held the tube of pen, slowly turned it in her hand, and a smile suddenly appeared on her lips. The whole question paper is indeed as Xie Wei said before, it is not particularly difficult, and most of the content of the school is the way of Confucius and Mencius, plus some poetry and rhyme, and music theory knowledge. Now she had answered a little bit in dog-crawling words. As for the rest of this, Zi said, the three armies can win the commandery, but the horsemen cannot win the ambition. What is the explanation? How can we talk about a gentleman's noble determination? Zhang Xuning seriously drew a Wang Ba on the answer sheet one by one, and then wrote, one said, when the puppet saw humiliation, he drew his sword and stood up to fight, which is not enough to be brave, and the second said, the puppet was angry and blood splashed 5 steps. If you are a puppet, you are mediocre, so how can you have ambition? If you have no ambition, what can you not take away? I don't know what to do, but I only understand one thing, the saint used to talk nonsense. Zi said, born virtuous in giving, what is the way to give? What this means is that Confucius said, God has given me such a character, what can the Huanwei of the Song Kingdom do to me? It is said that Confucius passed through the Song state when he went to the Chen Kingdom, and when Sima Huanwei of the Song Kingdom heard about it, he went to harm Confucius. At that time, Confucius was preaching Zhou etiquette with his disciples under the big tree, and Huanwei led people to cut down the big tree and wanted to kill Confucius. These words were uttered by Confucius on his way to escape. Scholars have always regarded Confucius as a sage, and all what Confucius said is right, even if he talks nonsense, he can give you a bunch of truths. Zhang Xuning looked at this sentence and almost rolled her eyes to the sky. If a person has virtue, he will be able to turn evil into good fortune and not be afraid of the harm of others. And this is still to describe yourself, and it is really not blushing to blow yourself. She has too many theories to stand up for this topic. Immediately, he brushed up on the answer sheet and worked hard to write. Except for the ugly words, there is nothing wrong with it. An hour and a half passed quickly. At this time, many other people in the hall had stopped writing, and the palace people struck the copper chime in the hall and came up to collect the scroll. When she received it in front of Zhang Xuning, she was still lying on the desk and writing. The palace man coughed, second Miss Zhang, hand in the papers. Zhang Xuning was unmoved, didn't look up at her, and only said, oh, wait until I finish writing the last sentence. The palace people couldn't help but be embarrassed, and subconsciously turned their heads to look at Xie Wei, who had already stood up and looked over here. Xie Wei didn't say anything. The palace people had no choice but to stand aside with their hands down, quietly waiting for Zhang Xuning to write. It's just that her last sentence seems to be extraordinarily long, and she has written a lot. Everyone's eyes fell on her, and they were a little puzzled in their hearts for a while, shouldn't it? Zhang Xuning seems to have taken all the questions that they had bet on before, which shows that she has been prepared for a long time, and this question paper is not very difficult, like Xiao Shu and Fan Yulan. In fact, it only took an hour to write the answer sheet, but they didn't want to be in the limelight and didn't hand it in advance. Why did she take so long? Finally, she put down her pen, and then lifted the densely written answer sheet from the case, blew the ink, and then handed it to the palace people who had been waiting for a long time. I'm tired. The palace people secretly breathed a sigh of relief. She only thought that this second girl Zhang was very serious about the school examination and was knowledgeable, so the answer sheet was so full. But when she took the answer sheet and saw that the ghost-like words were serious, and it was written so much, cold sweat almost came out on his forehead. The palace people didn't dare to say much, and after collecting all the answer sheets and sorting them out, they presented them to Xie Wei. At this time, the school examination is completed. Everyone relaxed a little. Fang Miao sat closer to Zhang Xuning, and after watching Xie Wei above take the answer sheet and lay it out on the desk, he leaned his head to her side and asked, "Why did you answer for so long? Could it be that there is something mysterious in the question that is not easy to find?" "There is no mystery. If there is one thing that must be said, it is the wisdom of the bar." Zhang Xuning also raised her eyes and glanced up, and saw that Xie Wei didn't pay attention to the bottom, so she turned her head and lowered her voice and said, "I'm just stupid, so I took a long time to answer." "Stupid? She looks like she has something to do with the word stupid." Fang Miao didn't want to talk to her for a moment, but felt that she was hypocritical of obviously being very powerful but preferring to be modest, so she glanced at her faintly and said, "You just pretend." Zhang Xuning saw that she didn't believe it, and it was difficult to explain anything more. Anyway, after answering the paper, she was relaxed. This time, the answer sheet was completely the right medicine, but I was afraid that those old men would blow their beards and stare at them when they saw them, and they would be angry. She doesn't have to worry about not being able to get out of the palace. So he quietly began to look at Xie Wei. The answer sheet on the desk is Xiao Shu, the eldest lady of the Qinqiu mansion. The hairpin is extremely beautiful, and it can be seen that it has been practiced for a long time. Xie Wei nodded lightly after reading it, then put the answer sheet aside, and picked up a new answer sheet to look at. His expression was still faint, and the people sitting down couldn't see any clues from it. But when it came to the fifth answer sheet, the corner of his eye suddenly twitched imperceptibly. Zhang Xuning, who was paying close attention to his expression, suddenly felt a shock in his heart. "It's your own time, it's your own time." Think about Xie Wei in the previous life. Familiar with the books of sages, proficient in hundreds of dialects, good writing, good conversation. I don't know if I see her answer sheet, will I smoke? If this person wants to change his face on the spot, how exciting should it be? God knows how much impact Xie Wei's heart was affected when he suddenly saw the dense dog-crawling words on the fifth answer sheet after reading the first four neatly written answer sheets. Horizontal and vertical are not straight, and the skimming is crooked. It's like a Taoist priest drawing ghost talismans, that is, even 7 or 8-year-old children in the school can write better than this. For a moment, his eyebrows furrowed, and he raised his hand to throw the answer sheet to the ground. But when you look at the frontispiece, the words Zhang Xuning come into view. Xie Wei pinched the fingers of the answer sheet tightly, only raised his gaze, and looked at the corner of the hall that had been brightly illuminated by the sky outside at this moment, and saw Zhang Xuning secretly looking at him, with a pair of black and white eyes that were a little fox-like and cunning dark light. But as soon as he turned his gaze, the dark light of wisdom disappeared cleanly, and he looked at it with an embarrassed and timid gaze, and soon lowered his head, as if he knew how badly he had answered, and he was very worried about it. Xie Wei stared at her for a long time. Zhang Xuning thought that he would withdraw his gaze just by looking at it, so soon after burying his head, he raised his head again, wanting to continue to see Xie Wei's reaction. But who would have thought that it would be right in front of his gaze, which he didn't even return. In an instant, the hairs stood on end. Although Xie Wei did not have a harsh and cold expression on his face, he looked indifferent, like a turbulent sea, but Jiang Xuning felt that there was a surging undertide hidden underneath, which was terrifying. The calmer it is outside, the more turbulent it is inside. The back of her neck was cold, and she resisted the urge to run away, and slowly buried her head again, but this time she didn't dare to raise it again. Xie Wei slowly withdrew his gaze and looked at the answer sheet again. Suddenly there was a great silence in the temple. Because all the other ladies of the family who were also secretly paying attention to Xie Wei's expression were very surprised to find that Mr. Xie, who didn't need to read the first half of the answer sheet at all, had already read the fifth answer sheet for a whole moment. Although the depth of that expression could not be seen, it was inexplicably afraid. For a moment, everyone was a little apprehensive. One prayed that this answer sheet would never be his own, and the other couldn't help but think, what shocking content was written on this answer sheet that could make Mr. Xie, who is the young master of the Crown Prince, look at it for so long? At this moment, the three old scholars of the Hanlin Academy who had gone out before came back from pacing outside, and at a glance, they knew that everyone had finished answering the questions, so they walked up and smiled at Xie Wei and said, "Are you reading the answer sheet?" As he spoke, he stretched out his hand to the answer sheet on the case. Xie Wei's eyelids jumped slightly, and he just quietly pulled away Jiang Xuning's answer sheet on his face, and then very naturally pulled over the remaining answer sheets and handed them out, saying, "There are a few gentlemen." Several old scholars didn't notice such a subtle action, and took the answer sheet and read 2 or 3 copies of it, and commented on it while reading, "This answer is simply not right. This one is also 1,000 words, and it is digressed for thousands of miles." Even Meng Yasheng said, "Born in sorrow and died in peace can't be solved. What kind of reading is this still in the palace?" Some of the ladies in the hall turned white. Jiang Xuning was a little relieved at this time, and secretly said that these old men were back, and when they saw their answers, they would definitely not let themselves be selected. And so, something great has been done. Soon, several gentlemen finished reading the answer sheet, picked out 4, and shook their heads at Xie Wei. This is to say that these few will not work. Xie Wei came over to take a look, didn't say anything, nodded, put all the answer sheets back together, and said to everyone, "I have just read the answer sheets with a few gentlemen, and the results of the evaluation have also come out." Everyone tensed and held their breath. Jiang Xuning quietly clenched her fists, waiting to hear her name. "Chen Shiyi, the scholar of Chen University, is good, you can stay." Fang Jian Zhenfu Fang Miao, medium, although it is a little worse in terms of knowledge, but it is better to write carefully and neatly in one hand, and it is very eager to learn, so it can be stayed. Xiao Shu, Chen Shiyi, and Yao Shi were not worried that they would not be able to get by, so when they heard the results, they were only excited for a moment, which was an expected dust. But Fang Miao was apprehensive. When he heard the word Kilio from Xie Wei's mouth, he almost couldn't help jumping up, and quickly got up and bowed to Xie Wei, "Student Xie Guo, for his guidance. I will work hard to learn in the future, and read well for Her Royal Highness the eldest princess." So there were 4 people left. When the rest of the people heard that the front was so smooth, they only thought that the gentlemen's requirements were actually very lenient, and even if they were not good at learning, they couldn't help but have a little hope, and felt that they might be able to pass with good luck. But no one expected that Xie Wei would read 3 names next, all of them. He glanced down, and saw that the names of the young ladies of the family were all pale and crying, so he said, "The answers of the young ladies are not all without merit, and they are already well informed compared to ordinary girls' families. It's just that now it's for Her Royal Highness the eldest princess to choose a companion, and you have to consider how well other people are educated, and so on. So don't worry too much." All 3 stood up and thanked them. At least on the surface, they are very convinced, and no one knows what they think in their hearts. The results of 7 people have already come out. There are 5 left. Zhang Suning felt that it should be her soon. At this time, Xie Wei picked up the 8th answer sheet, but did not speak immediately, but looked at it for a while, as if thinking about something. Zhang Suning thought this was her own. Unexpectedly, the next moment Xie Wei opened his mouth and asked, "Who is Fan Yulan?" Fan Yulan was stunned for a moment, got up and saluted, "Back to Mr. Xie, I am." Xie Wei's gaze fell on her, and he looked at her for a while before he said, "Go to the first class." Everyone's eyes, including Xiao Shu, widened in surprise. However, the next moment, Xie Wei said, "But you can't stay." "Can't stay?" Everyone was dumbfounded, and the previous look of surprise had not had time to put away. Fan Yulan didn't react herself. Xie Wei didn't explain anything, only handed her the answer sheet, and said, "Get back your answer sheet. I read the results before, but I didn't return the answer sheet." Seeing this, Fan Yulan was indifferent, and thought that she had done something wrong in the answer sheet, and was a little uneasy. She stepped forward and respectfully answered the paper. At this time, Xie Wei said to her lightly, "There are no good poems in the palace." Fan Yulan was shocked suddenly, and all kinds of thoughts came out of the depths of her heart for a while, and it was as difficult to stop as a river flowing. She held her answer sheet and stood in a daze for a long time. In the end, he bowed deeply to Xie Wei, "Yulan, remember Mr. Stewardship." No one else could understand this endless dialogue, only Zhang Suning next to her looked at Fan Yulan. Her face was slightly complicated. Fan Yulan has a poetic talent. Xie Wei, she saw her aura and talent from her answer sheet, so even if her answer sheet was first class, she didn't leave Fan Yulan to read with her. Because if you want to write good poetry, you can't stay in the palace. And Fan Yulan in the previous life, who later traveled all over the famous mountains and rivers, did write many good poems that men admired and recited. Zhang Suning in the previous life scoffed at this, and didn't understand how anyone could be willing to give up glory and wealth, and didn't have any doubts about Xie Wei's actions. Thinking about it, I lost my mind when I didn't pay attention. Until a sentence suddenly sounded in his ears, Ning dash. But only one word came out, and then suddenly stopped. Zhang Suning raised her eyes and saw Xie Wei looking at her from above, and for a while, she didn't know why. She originally felt that she was 9 out of 10, but now she was a little flustered. Maybe Xie Wei is too scary. She stood up and waited for him to read the final result. Xie Wei said the word Ning, and realized that it was not suitable for this place at this time, and his eyes narrowed slightly, so he changed his words as if nothing had happened, and said lightly, "Zhang Suning, Zhang Shilang's mansion, can stay." Zhang Suning subconsciously bowed. Mr. Xie instructed, "The courtiers will. When they go home." "Wait a minute. Zhang Suning, can stay." There was a sudden explosion in her mind like thunder, and she suddenly raised her head, because she was so surprised that she even forgot to hide her 2 bright and sharp eyes, and looked at Xie Wei at once. "Are you kidding? Isn't it clear to her herself what she answered and what words she wrote? Not to mention that she chose a companion for the eldest princess in the palace to read. Even if she took it to invite a gentleman from a private school, the gentleman might not be willing to teach." Fang Miao heard that she even said the word "go home," and couldn't help but smile, and only said, "Look, the last place is your turn. Our second girl Zhang is so happy that she is dizzy," and even began to talk nonsense. Xie Wei looked at her and said, "Miss Zhang." Zhang Suning's scalp was numb, and she didn't understand why things were suddenly out of control, and her heart was racing for a while. When will Her Royal Highness the eldest princess even be able to handle Xie Wei? Yan Lin is even more impossible. That is, Xie Wei wants to leave her to take a good look under her nose to see if she is pretending to be crazy and stupid? No. In any case, he could not stay in the palace. Not to mention being Xie Juan's student. That's looking for death. When people are in a hurry, they have quick wisdom. Zhang Xunning's eyes rolled. Even though he knew that he might make Xie Wei pay more attention to himself, he had to bite the bullet and say, Mr. Xie, the student has something unclear. Even though the gentleman read the papers on the spot, why couldn't Miss Fan be selected for the first class? And the gentleman only returned her answer sheet, but we couldn't see our own answer sheet, let alone the answer sheet of others. Although the students were selected to stay, they can put themselves in their shoes, and the rest of the people who were not selected are afraid that they do not know why they are not selected. Why can't we send out everyone's answer sheets, so that the unsuccessful ones can also be convinced? To be honest, as soon as Zhang Xunning's words came out, several people who had been deposed before were a little moved. It's not impossible to check the papers. What if someone is worse than you and gets away with it? However, Xie Wei just glanced at them, and didn't even change his straight voice. Second, Miss Zhang has a point. Although the answers of the unsuccessful candidates also said why they could not be selected, in the end, there are many flaws in it that cannot be explained in detail. If a few young ladies have the heart to learn, Xie will stay for a while to talk about it in detail for a few young ladies. Let's break it down in detail. How is this different from whipping a corpse in public? Originally, these people wanted to echo Zhang Xuning, but when they heard Xie Wei's words, they were afraid that their clumsy answer sheet would be put on the table and let everyone listen. It would be a shame to die. The previous intention disappeared all of a sudden. They all said, I'm convinced, I've got Mr. S guidance, and I don't dare to bother anymore. Zhang Xuning. She is 1 foot tall, and Xie Wei is 1 foot tall. Can't these stupid girls have a little backbone? Do you know what a good opportunity you gave up to stay in the palace? Can't anyone in the audience answer worse than me? Xie Wei only turned his eyes to look at Zhang Xuning. Does second Miss Zhang still have any questions? Zhang Xunning's eyelids jumped. But I. Xie Wei's fingers lightly pressed on the Wang Ba drawn on the answer sheet, and next to her was her uncomfortable answer without raising the bar, and she only interrupted expressionlessly, why don't you stay for a while, and wait for Xie to solve your puzzles alone? Zhang Xuning was terrified, and her face was almost green.